Good morning, everyone. Great to see you here, joining us for our next class in the series on The Way to Buddhahood by Venerable Master In Shun. Now, I've just noticed, I think in the title that I've got, this is class number 9, but thinking back, it might be class number 10, but I'll change that again later. Today we're going to try to get through 3 verses. We'll see how that goes. So let's just jump straight on into it. Okay. So we've been talking about the ways in which and how we go about this actual process of like hearing the Dharma. We've got to find a good teacher, surround ourselves with like-minded fellow practitioners, and then there's various conditions we need to have in place. Last week we were talking about what are known as external conditions. So those include like the teacher and those supporting practitioners. And today we're moving into internal requirements, which is more about things for us personally as the practitioner. Now, the first one, we've got a couple of little subsections here. The first one is avoiding the 8 obstacles, Yun Li Ba Nan. And this is pretty straightforward. You could talk about the content of this for quite a lot of detail, but I think the basic ideas are pretty straightforward, so we should be able to get through that pretty quickly. Okay, so what do we need to do? What do we need to do to prepare ourselves and make sure we are in a position to be able to hear the Dharma, read the Dharma, contact the Dharma, and then go about and practice it? Now, these 8 obstacles are actually like really broad things. They're almost things that you need to do over multiple lifetimes. It's not just a case of, oh, something I can do today. It's something like you need to have prepped these for quite some time. So let's have a look at them. 离彼三途苦，不生承受天，佛是生中国，根据理写见. So the first one is avoid the 3 painful destinies. Then do not be reborn as a long-lived God. Be reborn in the time of a Buddha and in the central countries. Have healthy sense organs and be free from deviant views. So this is a total of 8 things. The first 3 are just like avoid the 3 painful destinies. So in other words, don't be reborn as either a being in the hells or as one of these like hungry spirits, sometimes translated as hungry ghosts, or don't be reborn as an animal. And that sounds pretty basic. And like I said, these are like classic cases of it's not something you can do today. Either today you're a human or you're not. So if you're listening to it now, already it means you've managed to avoid these 3 really bad situations, because if you're any of these 3, you're not going to come to the Dharma. You have no time, no intelligence, and whatever to be able to do anything with the Dharma. Now, it kind of makes sense on one side, don't have these like really bad rebirths, but then the next part there is do not be reborn as a long-lived God. And then, well, what's wrong with that? Now, some people might jump in and think, because, Buddhism, it's like almost like defining Buddhism as like the opposite to theistic religion. So anything that theistic religions might suggest, like being reborn among the gods, being reborn in the heavens, Buddhism would say, no, don't do that, it's the opposite. But it's not really quite that simple. And if we look at early Buddhist teachings, the Buddha, and I'm going to say this very clearly, the Buddha definitely said that being reborn in the heavens was a basic goal for a lot of lay Buddhist practice. And we're actually going to see this maybe in a week or 2 when we're talking about the different vehicles, right? I mentioned this right at the start of this whole text, the different vehicles. And one of them is being reborn as a human. Another one is being reborn in the heavenly worlds. But there's a problem with that. So although that lifestyle is very blissful, it's very happy, which in general is not a bad thing. Okay, we can't say it's a bad thing. But at the same time, what it means is in that kind of lifestyle, one is very disinclined to practice the Dharma. Now, if I can make like a metaphor here, now the text is literally saying don't be reborn among the long-lived gods. But if you can take it as a metaphor, sometimes there's a saying in Chinese which is 富贵修道难, which means people who are like wealthy and powerful, it's very difficult for them to cultivate the Dharma. And one of the reasons is simply when you've got everything you need, right? You're materially wealthy and live a life of luxury. It's sort of hard to think like, oh, I need to like improve my life. I need to improve my ethics and try to, become a better person, because we kind of get easily bogged down in just enjoying life. Life's very comfy. It's very nice. Why do I need to change it? So it's a similar kind of idea here. The fact that the text says long-lived gods, that's not really the main point, which is just to say that the heavenly realms, the beings there, have very long lifetimes. That's the main thing. So that's 4. So avoid the 3 painful negative destinies, avoid those higher destinies among the heavenly beings. So that's 3 plus 1 is 4. The next one is to be born in the time of a Buddha. Now again, if you're hearing this now, you've already managed to accomplish that, right? Now it doesn't have to be being reborn in the world when a Buddha is alive. It refers to the time when a Buddha is alive or when the teachings of the Buddha remain in the world. So usually it's said, the time of the Buddha at first is known as the time of the true Dharma, the Zhengfa. Then we go on to this period where it's kind of like the Dharma's still around, but it's not really as pure and pristine and clear as what it was, during the Buddha's own times, or Xiangfa, sort of like Dharma likeness age. It's a pretty horrible term in English. But it means like there's something very close to the true Dharma. And then you get this later period, which is known as the Morpha, the Dharma ending age. Now, there are different accounts for how long each of these ages last, but in most of those systems, now we would be considered to be in the Dharma ending age. Now, this is a whole big thing in Mahayana Buddhism in particular, not only Mahayana Buddhism, and there are many traditions that sort of have this idea that we're now so far in time from the time of the Buddha that what we think of as practice of Dharma really isn't. It's just this kind of like corrupting distortion of the Dharma. Now, this is still in the time of Buddha. It's still something that you can find and encounter. There's still some basic core ideas of right view and right practice in there, so definitely don't give up hope. I mean, there are definitely some that also sort of argue that it's not quite so cut and dry. It is. At the time of the Buddha, everything's perfect and it just kind of goes downhill from there. But say the Buddhas will kind of go in like cycles as it goes, but it will definitely wear out at some point. There will be some time when Buddhism is, only in the history books, and then later it's just going to be not even in the history books. But for now, at least, there is some Dharma to practice, so don't give up hope, okay? So that's all we need there for this 5th point, to be reborn in the time of a Buddha, or in the time of the Buddha's teachings, shall we say. The 6th point is born in the central countries. Now, if you read the Chinese, you might see that it says Sheng Zhongguo, and of course Zhongguo is China, literally the Middle Kingdom. It doesn't mean China, okay? This does not mean China. It means Madhya Pradesh. It's the central area, and this means, if we think in like the old Indian way of thinking, there was a place that was the core area of where the Buddha taught. So in ancient times, this would be Magadha, Koshala, these 2 big kingdoms. They had a similar culture, they used similar languages. That was the area where the Buddha was teaching, so his teachings were already adapted for the people and the culture in that place and that time. And therefore people in that place and that time would be much more easily able to understand him. We even see like evidence of this in the early scriptures. Like there's this bit of a discussion one time between people who come from the same clan as the Buddha, the Shakyans, and they're talking with other people, and the Shakyans kind of end up saying like, he's the Buddha, we know what he's saying, like he's talking our language literally, whereas those of us now, of course, reading texts in Pali or Sanskrit, for many of us it's a foreign language, and we might have those language skills and be good at it, but it's still not 100% the same. So to be born in that central country is this area where those Dharma teachings are really prevalent. It's really deeply embedded in that culture. And so if you think about it like that, you can also argue that it's not just this like little portion of kind of northern, slightly eastern India around the Ganges River, but any place which has got like quite a strong vein of Buddhist culture we could consider as being a central country. Or you could even say really any area where the Dharma exists is a central country. It doesn't have to be like limited so narrowly. So this is point number 6. Then have healthy sense organs. Now, it's not just literally healthy sense organs. In the old teachings of saying this, it would be to say that, one would have to have one, like have the senses. If Dharma teachings are given orally, you have to be able to hear. Or if Dharma teachings are written, you have to be able to read. So your vision and your hearing are kind of important. I mean, nowadays we could expand that out and say, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't actually know this. There are some places, where they have Dharma teachings in Braille. If you can't read, and for people who can't hear as well, they can still contact the Dharma in that way. So the main thing was to be able to contact the Dharma through the senses, but also this idea includes to be sane, basically. People who have like severe mental illness, and it could be mental, physical illness, who also won't be able to have contact with the Dharma. So you have to have to be pretty much healthy body and mind. It doesn't have to be perfect health, of course. I'm sure many people can have, many of us have senses that aren't working properly, be it vision or hearing. We all have mental health issues, right? But for most of us, that's not a limiting factor. We can still contact the Dharma, but if those are really serious, then we can't. We are again restricted in being able to contact the Dharma. And last one, be free from deviant views. This last point is often sometimes also connected with the predominant culture of that place and time. So if one is born into like a particular culture where, say, sacrifice of animals, slaughtering of animals as a religious practice is this kind of dominant religious idea, and one also does that practice because they believe that that's correct or a good practice because that's the whole culture. This, by Buddhist terms, would be considered a deviant view. Slaughtering animals to try to get some kind of good or auspicious results is not going to work, right? It just totally goes against the Dharma. So you've got these 8 points to avoid. It's kind of a bit ironic because pretty much anyone who's listening to these teachings, you don't have these problems. But if we think about it like in big terms, if we think about a Dharma practice as this ongoing practice, it's not something we do today or this week or this month or this year or even this lifetime. It's something that was going to go on for a long time. And we need to make sure that we're going to be safe in that regard, right? So that's the basic idea here. Okay. Avoiding the 8 obstacles, or the 8 difficulties, or sometimes the 8 sort of inauspicious circumstances. Okay, let's jump into this next one here, which is talking about attaining a human form. So these kind of go together, right? You've got to avoid certain forms of rebirth, but you also need to have a human rebirth. And talking about the importance of a human rebirth. So let's read this verse. 生死流转中，人生最难得，一反省勤勇，三是生诸天。In the cycles of transmigration through birth and death, a human form is the most difficult to attain. With the ability to recollect, pure conduct, and diligent courage, these 3 things make human life superior to the gods. Okay, so the opening line there, 生死流转, 生死 literally birth and death, and 流转 literally flowing and rolling, but actually both of these terms are translations of the Sanskrit or Pali word samsara, right? So we know this is the cycle of ongoing birth and death. We die, but due to our karma driving us on through the mental factors, other than just purely the physical body, it's the physical body that dies. We take rebirth in some other form, we live our lives, we commit various actions, etc., right? Samsara, this really key idea for not just Buddhism, but many other Dharmic religions, and religions outside of Asia and India as well. So within that process, we go through so many lifetimes, just lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and just beginningless. 人生最难得. A human form, or literally a human body, but it means like the human rebirth, is the most difficult to attain. Difficult in that it's very precious. Sometimes you'll think, but there's think how many humans are there on the planet? There's 7 billion or 8 billion or how many billion? Come on, human life is not that precious. And sometimes when we look at the way the world seems, unfortunately, most of us do treat human life like it's not very important when it's other people's lives. There's other people in other places that we don't care about. Unfortunately, that's how we do often think. But when we think about it like this, and this is something I often tell my students, okay, so how many humans are there? So many billion. Okay, how many birds are there? And you're like, how many birds? I mean, probably more than 8 billion, right? How many fish are there? how many fish in the sea? And I'm not just talking about big fish. I'm talking about little fish. How many insects are there? Oh, I mean, that's just like a mind-boggling figure. I can probably go online and Google that. I'm sure there's someone out there, some scientist somewhere has made some, like, they haven't counted them, but they've made some number, some figure about how many of some certain types of life form there are. And if we think about it in that way, I mean, numbers of humans always growing, and our destruction, particularly of larger mammals, has been horrific, and also birds, and also fish. But compared to other life forms, we're not that many, because we're kind of big, if you know what I mean, compared to like little other tiny critters on the world. So if we're just thinking about humans and animals, and the percentage of all those that are humans, it's not many. And from the Buddhist point of view, obviously, if we want to include the other forms, from the hungry ghosts, from the hell beings, from the various forms of divine beings, humans are actually a tiny minority. That is why it's said that a human form is difficult to attain. To get a human form. You don't want to be in the lower forms. They got problems. They got suffering. They got problems. They aren't practicing the Dharma. The higher forms, though, they're just like soaking up the luxury, sitting in the heavenly VIP bar room, right, by the pool. They're not practicing Dharma either. And then this little bit kind of in the middle of the humans. Oh, that's the sweet spot in terms of our rebirths. And so we've mentioned why the lower realms and the higher realms not so good, but there's 3 points in particular that Master Inshun wants to point out that make human rebirth so good. The first one is the ability to recollect. The second is pure conduct, and the intelligent courage, which is kind of like the ability to put like effort into the practice. So we're able to recollect various experiences that we have. We can kind of reflect on our actions and the consequences of those actions. And I don't mean that we can see like karma and karmic result through multiple lifetimes. I don't mean that. Just we can reflect on our actions, and we can recall the teachings and put them into practice. And that's actually something that many other life forms can't do. Our hell beings are just absolutely submersed in pain all the time. Animals are, I mean, there's the cool, fun, intelligent animals, and dolphins, and chimpanzees, Someone's going to argue, dolphins are smart enough to practice Buddhism. And maybe they can, actually. They do some quite, almost, we see them as, virtuous acts at times, saving people from killer sharks. Can they practice Dharma? Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to categorically say one way or the other. But that's not the point. The point is, in general, human beings have this intelligence. They can also engage in, here I've translated as pure conduct. Literally, it's Fansing, which is a Brahmacharya, which is basically the spiritual life. We can make these decisions to lead a particular lifestyle that's conducive to our spiritual well-being. And the last one, Tinyok, is so diligent courage. It's kind of courage, but it also has a sense of yeah, I'm going to do it. Put in that effort, work hard to attain those goals. And that's also something that humans have that motivation to do, particularly if we compare it to, say, the divine beings who are still just, lounging by the divine VIP pool, everything's lovely in the heavens, why should I make greater effort, instead of the gods, and they kind of lounge around just soaking up the fun until their time runs out as gods, because they also die, and then they get all panicky, their hands get sweaty, and their beautiful flowers in their hair and their beautiful flower necklaces all wilt, and then they just totally freak out. It's kind of interesting, because it's a bit like, I sometimes, when I'm trying to think of what that idea of a divine life would be like, really, it's kind of like so far removed from humans. But if you think about the super rich, the super rich and powerful, and they've got all this power and and life and prestige, and they can surround themselves by material wealth and luxury, and they still get old and die, and it must be absolutely terrifying for them. I mean, regular people are just we're getting old. You start to see it. You don't have to be 80 to start to realize that you're getting old, right? But for some people, they want to cover it up. They just want to constantly more plastic surgery, more makeup, more creating my image. And so they freak out at that moment. And then it's kind of a bit too late to do much about it. Whereas humans can kind of see it early on. We've got that intelligence, that reflection, And we're at the spot between being submerged in pain and being just submerged in pleasure, that we can kind of see, yeah, there's some pleasure and pain, and I can find this kind of balance in there that gives me enough space to also think about life and think about where I'm going, and then engage in practices for the betterment of myself. So these three things make human life superior to the gods. Okay, 2 verses so far. I'm doing well. I think we're going to get through. We can get through 3 verses here today. Whoop, let me just pop up here. Okay. Sorry, it's a bit hard for me to read because I actually have the camera like right in front of the screen. Okay, so verse number 24, last one for today. 难得知你得，精勤修法行，莫使入宝山，垂手贪空归。Now, having attained a human rebirth that is difficult to attain, vigorously cultivate the practice of the Dharma. Do not be like one who enters a mountain of treasures only to vainly return empty-handed and regretful. Now this first line here, 难得知你得, is kind of like, it's like a classic expression in Chinese Buddhism. You say 人生难得知你得. It's like human rebirth is hard to attain, and now I have attained it. And then 佛法难闻知你闻, it's difficult to hear the Dharma, but now I have heard it. So it's like a little reminder. There's many teachings that actually put this, like start of any Dharma practice or many Dharma practices, remind yourself of this at the start. We used to do this during our meditation retreats, just like to reflect on that. Some circumstances it doesn't work very well. We did that in meditation retreats in South Africa, but most of the people on the retreats I don't think had a particularly Buddhist worldview. So you're telling them it's difficult to attain a human birth, and they're like, what? But like I'm a human? What else would I be? Because they just think of themselves as this one lifetime. But if we have this broader view, and this view of like samsara and the situation there, then you can think about it, hey, wow, I have been reborn as a human. That is pretty amazing. It's not chance, of course. It's come about due to my own actions, my own karmic result. But I need to cherish that, make the best use of it, and also make sure that I have this opportunity in the future as well. And we'll be talking more about that later, particularly when we get to the ideas of the 5 precepts. So, having attained this very precious human life, vigorously cultivate the practice of the Dharma. A lot of the Tibetan teachings as well, teachings like the Lamrim, so the stages on the path, they often put this contemplation right at the beginning to reflect on the preciousness of human birth. And it's to sort of say, hey, you've won the lottery here. You're a human. Of all the things you could be, like, this is amazing. Now make the most of it. Do not let this life go to waste. It can be really powerful motivation. And even if we can't keep up that motivation, like every second, a minute of our lives, sometimes before we engage in a practice, you're going on a meditation retreat, use this to like drum up a bit of like, I gotta do it, gotta work hard, gotta do my best, right? 人生难得知你得. Human life is difficult to attain, and now I have attained it. 佛法难闻知你闻. The Dharma, it's difficult to hear. It's like it's a rare opportunity, and now I've got this opportunity. So I'm going to vigorously cultivate the practice of the Dharma, so that I do not be like one who enters a mountain of treasures only to return home empty-handed. So it's sort of like this opportunity to encounter the Dharma. It's like somebody who's traveled on this huge long journey to like this treasure island, and you know, it's like mountains and gold and pearls and jewels, but in the end they don't take anything at all, and they just get back in the boat and sail home, and then they get home like, oh, I didn't bring anything with me, like I went that way and then like I got nothing. Like, that is like such a waste. Like, make the most of this opportunity. So there's a very important, a very powerful contemplation, you know, but it's still rooted in this idea of, you know, samsaric existence in particular. And that doesn't mean you have to have this view of like multiple lifetimes and the rarity of a human rebirth to be able to make the most of your human life. That's true. I mean, there's still the old, right, YOLO, you only live once, and some people also have that mentality, well, you only live once, so therefore I'm going to make the most of my life. It's kind of interesting, like a completely different view, a completely different worldview, that comes to the same conclusion of, I still got to make the most of it. So however you want to get to that point, okay, that's going to be up to you. The most important thing is make the most of this opportunity. When you can, put in that practice, and you will not regret it in the end. Okay, so that brings us up there to the end of the verses for today. We do have some more verses. The next section talks about the goal and the 3 motivations, and that's going to be a little bit about looking at the kind of like the 5 vehicles. We're going to go into the 5 vehicles: the human vehicle, the divine vehicle, the vehicle for the liberated arahants, the vehicle of the Prajika Buddhas, the solitary Buddhas, and last but not least, the Bodhisattva vehicle that leads to awakening. So the 5 vehicles, and these are in turn broken up into 3 basic motivations. Your human and your divine vehicles are basically looking for happiness in this life and future lives. So that's one basic motivation. Your path to become a liberated arahant or a Prajika Buddha is looking for liberation from samsara for oneself primarily. But the last motivation, the motivation of the Bodhisattva path, the Mahayana, is seeking that ultimate happiness for oneself and for others. And that's what we're going to be looking at next, and setting up this whole framework for then getting into the rest of those teachings. Now I'm going to try to jump on over here, make sure everything's going right in the session. Yep, okay. So I just have to check the technical side of things. Just a reminder, I don't think I've mentioned this, while we're doing the live stream here on Facebook, so I run it through some OBS software, so that's how I can do the different scenes and stuff. So I can bounce scenes around like this. And then we put it through Facebook. There's also a Bodhi Tree Buddhism channel on YouTube, and all the videos also go up on YouTube there as well. And so you can access them on YouTube if for whatever reason Facebook isn't working for you. So also feel free to go in and check those out, and you can subscribe and get updates if maybe for whatever reason you can't pick it up on the old FB. Okay, well that's about it for me today. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope this gives you some good vibes for the start of your Sunday morning, or Sunday morning in my case. Don't know what time it is wherever you are. Wherever you are, wherever you may be, I just hope this little Dharma message gives you a bit of positive energy, sets your mind in the right place, and then from there, you take it from there and you do the best. You do what you can with your practice to turn your life for the better. Okay, thanks everyone. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.